Been a couple of days since I had the opportunity to just kind of put something together. Yeah, I've been doing quite a bit of overtime at the hospital the past couple of days just because we've been short. I just came off of a 5 day stretch. Three of those days were overtime. I think so far I've done like 7 or 8 days of just overtime. I do 13. I'm already nearing in on 20, and I've still got another three more this weekend coming up, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then another day of cross training tomorrow. Because the hospital's like, in case we get another surge, like last time, they want us to be cross trained for ICU. And I was thinking, you know, grab the old, everywhere I go, everybody's got one of these on. Just about everywhere I go, everybody's got one on. And there's so much misinformation and disinformation is so prevalent that even when information comes out to the contrary, people disbelieve it. There's been lots of information talking about that children are very low susceptible to the virus, right? And yet we see, and especially here in New York, teachers union, they don't want to go back to work. They've been delayed again and again and again. I think they said that they're supposed to start the distance learning, I think next week or something. And maybe it's like that in your neighborhood, or wherever you are watching this. And I mean, I haven't seen a COVID patient in a few months. There's one, I should say, that there's one on our unit. She's been there a long time, but she's old. If she would have got the flu, she would be sick. And it's a person who's got like a laundry list of, like, it's a person literally at end of life that they just don't want to let go of. It's a sad situation to watch. A topic for another video of how in the hospital setting, we typically, like, almost in the hospital setting, it's like almost bordering suffering of patients, of elderly patients. Even the ones who have already signed that they're DNR and they're DNI, it almost comes to the point where, like, I feel like a lot of these people are suffering. And as much as you try to advocate for them, uh, you know, sometimes the families just don't want to let go, or doctors are unwilling to treat the patient as hospice. I worked as a hospice nurse in Manhattan, here in the city. I worked both in hospice and I worked in the community. So I would go to people's homes and I would medically manage them from the home setting to make their transition from life to death easier and less painful, less agitation, less issues with shortness of breath or constipation, etc. And I did that for a couple of years, both inpatient and, of course, home hospice. I also had the opportunity to do like visiting nurse, not for the company, but I worked for other companies doing like the visiting nurse role, both in admitting patients and, of course, managing patients in the home. I've worked in a nursing home. I've worked in just about every single hospital here in Manhattan. And so it's, for me, it's like, it's sad to see that this is how patients unfortunately are treated within the medical system. I always tell everybody, as a side note, never go into a hospital by yourself. I mean, that's just me. I would never want any of my family members to go into a hospital by themselves just because I know how patients get treated. But that's a different topic for another video. What I really wanted to discuss was literally everywhere I go. Yesterday I was on my way waiting for the bus, and I was talking to like another elderly woman about the whole thing that's going on, that there's so many businesses here in Manhattan that have been closed down and shuttered that will never return. And I was telling her, it's all for naught, because a lot of what you see is just misinformation. You're literally being lied to on TV through social media. Wanting to, if you're wanting to go to church or bury a loved one, go visit an elderly person in a nursing home, go to the gym, eat out at a restaurant, your local government is more likely cracking down on your ability to do that, saying the virus, social distancing. we need to worry about the virus. But if you're a protester, or if you're someone who has a gripe and you want to mass together, well, then no one says anything. Not only do not the politicians don't say anything, but even the medical community don't come out and say anything. And on multiple levels, we see that accurate information, even from those that you may trust, like the medical community, has been compromised. It's literally been compromised. And I always ask, because I see other individuals, I see other nurses, I see other doctors literally out in the fresh air wearing, an N95 mask, wearing gloves, wearing face shields out, in the open air. And I'm like, you don't contract the virus that way. You don't contract any respiratory virus that way, especially out in the open where the air is literally blowing in one direction, moving particles away from you. It makes little sense to wear a mask, especially when you're not even near people. I see people coming out of their cars with masks on, and I don't mean just like, these, cloth masks. I mean, even the N95 mask that we typically reserve for patients that have like tuberculosis or the so-called virus. Like for the most part, we only use those N95s on patients who are suspected of TB. And I see people wearing them literally out in the fresh air in their car. And it just goes to show you how compromised people are nowadays. Even when there's information to the contrary, people have literally been so misled and are so afraid that even when you give them information that shows that they're being misled, they refuse to believe it. You even have people like you see in this picture, who get utilized by individuals in positions of authority to attack you if you start to rebel and say, I don't want to wear a mask, or I don't want to social distance. I don't need to go to the supermarket and put on a mask. I don't need to be walking around in my own community with a mask on for fear I'm going to catch something just breathing the fresh air. And in my neighborhood where I live, it's primarily white upper middle class that live here. And most of them, the vast majority of them, wear masks. And every day they see me, because every day when I come home from work, especially lately that I've been doing a lot of overtime, they see me in my scrubs with no mask on, and they all look at me like, you're a medical personnel, why are you not wearing a mask? On occasion, I have had people that ask me, why are you not wearing a mask? And I tell them straightforwardly, I was like, there's literally no reason for you to be wearing a mask out in public in the fresh open air. That's not going to protect you. You're not gonna get sick. But people are so afraid that, I mean, even the ordinance here in New York is, if you cannot social distance, wear a mask, right? So if I'm literally within contact with someone and we can't be at least 6 feet apart, well then, the law is that you should wear a mask. But people just wear a mask wherever they go, even if they're walking the street on their own. I even see people on bicycles, on like the little scooters here in Manhattan, and they're in the street. So they're like, there's nobody near them. There's no one within like 20 feet of them because they're in the street and they still have a mask on. And it just goes to show how gullible the American people are. And the real threat is, you are literally this close to losing your freedom. What if the government tomorrow came out and said, we've got a new vaccine, right? Everybody's got to get back to work and we're going to give everybody a vaccine for the virus. Would you take it? What if the government said, well, if you don't take it, you can't go back to work? At home, you might say, fuck it, I'm not taking that shit. Hells no. Until the day you get called into your manager's office or into HR and they say, are you going to take the virus? Yes or no? Are you going to take the vaccine? Yes or no? And you say no, and they say, well, you'll be fired. Would you be willing to go that route? Would you be willing to go the distance? It doesn't take that much, because people are so gullible and people are so willing to just fall in line and be fearful. And then you have these same individuals that will go out and protest and rally and burn down businesses and burn down communities and kill people openly in public, and people don't do anything. You rely on the police officers thinking that they have taken an oath to serve and protect you. And yet the mayor in many of these cities have told police to stand down, and they will allow your business, your home, they will allow your loved ones to lose their lives. You think that they're there to protect you, but they're there to protect the state. They're there for the state. They're not there for you. That's why, for as far as back as many, I mean, I never really appreciated the Second Amendment until today, until the days that we're living in today. I really never appreciated the importance of the Second Amendment until the pandemic. Because it doesn't take that much. It just takes a little push, and you could literally lose your freedom. America could literally be Nazi Germany with just a few choices, a few decisions. A couple of mayors decide to stand down. Maybe a couple of white people try to rise up, and the government turns around on them and says, well, we killed some white supremacists. We killed some white racists. We put them down, right? Or they just allow some of these rioters to just have at them and to say, well, they were acting in a way to protect themselves. It really doesn't take all that much for you to lose your freedom, especially when people are so freely willing to give it up for supposed security, right? Protecting themselves, like wear a mask, right? Protect yourself and protect others. Yet this, what you see in this picture, is allowed to go on, where people are literally in mass, no social distancing, protesting at City Hall, right? Because Trump was going to appoint another judge because the other, what's her name, died. And so they were out here in mass protesting. And some people are wearing masks, but there's no social distancing. And these cloth masks would not protect you if this virus was actually that deadly. If the virus was as deadly as the media and certain members within the government would like you to think, these little shitty masks would not save you. Neither would those little cloth masks, like you can see this person right here, right? These cloth masks would not protect you if the virus was that deadly. The reason, realistically speaking, if the virus was that deadly, you would not see people willing to congregate together, because as a result of congregating together, you would see the virus would spread, and people who are susceptible. You can see that in this picture. There's an old white lady. You can see an older gentleman here. There's plenty of old people, right? People who would be susceptible to things like the flu, but yet they have no fear. There's no fear of congregating in mass. But if the virus was real, and if it was as deadly as people today want you to believe, these people would not be congregating together, because they would see people congregating together. They would see people and getting sick and dying, but they're not. Even political leaders, right? Even people like Cuomo, right? No fear whatsoever of catching the virus. And he's an older man in his 50s, right? I'm sure he has comorbidities. At the very least, he has heart failure. Everybody has heart failure. Your heart degrades over time, right? It's just a reality of how the body works. It's like a car, it breaks down over time. Everybody's heart starts to fail over time. And then, of course, he's around Black people and other minorities who are even more susceptible than he is, because you see things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity within Black and Hispanic communities, more so than you would in like a white community. Like he's white Italian. It doesn't take that much for you to lose your freedom. And it's really important to keep that in mind. You know, like I said, I never really appreciated the purpose of having the Second Amendment until the pandemic. And I realized real quickly that if shit hit the fan, I was not prepared. realistically speaking. You see individuals out there, people are just eating, minding their own business. All of a sudden, a crowd shows up out of nowhere, and it's either submit or they get attacked. You see people getting pulled over in cars. They try to have rational conversations, and they threaten them with violence to the point where the people have to leave. You see old people trying to protect their businesses, and they turn on them. You see people just out for a meal, out for a drink, and then the masses show up. And most people just don't even do anything. Most people try to walk away. People are too afraid to resist. And the reality is, if the day came where people's freedoms were just threatened, I think a lot of Americans would just fold. As free as America is, I think a lot of people in America are not willing to fight for freedom. And I think a lot of times I see, what is his name, Ted Cruz talk about it. He talks about, that our ability to be free, literally like that, can be taken away. And that's the reality. Just looking at how people are today and seeing the unwillingness of people to push back. And I see it all the time from city to city to city. And you see these rioters intimidating older people. And the community itself doesn't rise up. The community of itself doesn't rise up. They're too afraid. They're either too afraid to get involved because they know that the police will intervene against them. They know that the government, their politicians, will act against them. And so people become afraid because everybody acts individually instead of doing what they do, which is act collectively. It is a sad state of affairs of what we are watching. People think, oh, it's just politics as usual. The scene is set for the wrong person to come into power and for you to lose the freedoms that many of you hold dear.